Peace and riches blessings to you. This is Michael Bernard Beckwith, the founder and spiritual director of the Agape International Spiritual Center and the author of Spiritual Liberation, Life Visioning, Fulfilling Your Soul's Potential, and 40-Day Mind Fast Soul Feast. You're entering now into the vibration of Wake Up, the sound of transformation, a weekly program that invites you to discover not only who and what you really are, but to embrace the evolutionary impulse that governs all creation, that you may live up to your true potential, that you may anchor the realm of ever-expanding good, the realm of excellence on earth as it is in the mind of the infinite. Today, you're listening with the ear beyond the ear, that you can begin to catch that there's something magnificent about you and that your life is an on purpose with a purpose. Week after week, we will have powerful guests who have embodied spiritual principles and who are activating their own potential to begin to assist in the birthing of a kind and just global society of which you are to be a soulful participant. Listen with the ear beyond the ear and feel absolutely that there is something so good about you that it must be expressed. You have entered into the vibration of Wake Up, the sound of transformation. I have with me today Abigail Diaz Juan. We call her Abby. And she's international speaker, venture capitalist, spiritual entrepreneur, woman's empowerment advocate. She presents a revolutionary approach to rediscovering the self, redefining the way life is meant to be lived, and revitalizing personal potential and purpose. Years ago, Abby reached her pinnacle of business success as a venture capitalist, managing her own multi-billion-dollar venture fund in Silicon Valley. When her destiny came knocking, it triggered a spontaneous Kundalini awakening disguised as a debilitating illness, forcing her to retire from that successful life. Abby was introduced to a new paradigm of living, the unseen quantum world operated by the human algorithm. You are love. You are to love, and its scientific principles for living and being. She discovered that a member of the human species, she's already a natural person, inherently powerful in her own right, with her own personal calling as her birthright. She was taken through her own spiritual hero's journey, where the human mechanics of her personal transformation were scientifically broken down step by step, so she could guide others on how to go on their own destined journeys to personal greatness and business success. With an emphasis on converting fear into natural power, Abby's book, How Me Found I, Mastering the Art of Pivoting Gracefully Through Life, equips readers with the necessary skills to turn moments of negativity into pivotal opportunities for spiritual development, personal empowerment, and ultimate fulfillment in life as they move forward toward their desired reality and natural destiny. Listen, this is a powerful being that I'm about to speak to. Abby, welcome to Wake Up, the Sound of Rhythm and Joy.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Beckwith.
Absolutely. You have You Are Love, but the two stands for A squared, which means accept, allow, release, and embrace. And before we get into the book, I read a little bit about your bio here, but in your own words, tell us what happened with you and how you came to be what you're doing right now. What is your personal story?
Well, first, let's just call this a story of two halves. The first half of it was I, like everybody else, went on a pursuit for money and success, and that basically led me up the mountain from being an entrepreneur, starting my own business, to eventually becoming a venture capitalist with a fairly large fund at the very beginning of a venture capitalist career. But what was significant about that was I was angry at God and determined to do it by myself and needed to prove something to the world. So it was a very effortful, very hard journey, and it took a lot out of me. And I was spending a lot of my time traveling internationally. And then there came a point at the height of my career where I found myself in a hotel room at the Mayfair Intercontinental in London, staring up at the mirror in the jacuzzi room and thinking to myself, how did I get here? And realizing how extremely unhappy I was, even though I had everything that people mostly consider is what they need for happiness and success.
Right.
And I resolved I wanted to find something better. I didn't want that emptiness anymore inside of me. And what ended up happening was as soon as I came back to the States, within a few months I got very sick with adrenal fatigue syndrome. And that triggered a spontaneous Kundalini awakening within me and took me through the next 15 years of a spiritual journey, where I actually discovered the other half, which is really the more important half in my opinion, which is that we are all human. Before we are our roles as a venture capitalist for me, before I was a female as a gender, I am a human being first and foremost. And the importance of that is, as a human being, we are inherently powerful in our own right. We just don't know that.
Right.
And so this last 15 years has been that discovery and understanding how to access that power and understand that it's just simply a natural part of us that we have just simply not been exposed to or have forgotten. And
Right.
it is a path of remembering.
Right. And so basically we come in as spiritual beings having a human incarnation, and we're imprinted with whatever's going on in the world. And as you talked about, there's survival and materialism or whatever's going on. And it kind of covers up the natural tendency of us to express ourselves as spiritual beings. So in many cases, such as your own, it almost takes a crisis to come back to who we are.
I think the more we are so focused on determining that we will succeed at all costs, we get further and further away from that natural quietness within us. And so it takes a very big trauma or crisis to snap us back. And the way I differentiate the two is I say that particular person was a socially conditioned personality.
Yes.
We are conditioned by our environment and our society to survive, and that's what becomes our primary focus. That's in contrast to the natural person, which some people relate to as the I am within us. And when you get to the two, and what's exciting about me today is having gone through both halves, I now feel whole, because you have to live in this world. You have to live in society and participate in society, but you don't have to be of it to be in it.
Right. And that's what it means to be in it, but not of it, to be of your higher purpose, but actually making a contribution to society, but not being imprinted by the historical aspect of society.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, you can condense it into one sentence, which, listening to you read my bio, you read it so much better than I could, especially when you say, you are love. I'm like going, where's that book? Who's that woman? I need to talk to her.
Right.
But, the statement, you are love, as opposed to I am love, in South Africa, they call it Ubuntu, where you recognize the other person as a mirror of yourself, your own humanity. But I even propose to take it even further, and I say you are love is an algorithm.
Yes.
The you part is you yourself as a human being, and the abilities, both spiritually and scientifically, the principles that gather your existence. Then R, which is A squared RE, is basically the art of pivoting, which is what you do in alignment with the universe, being in sync, being in flow. And the reason for that is because it applies to the science of angular rotation. We turn to exist, we exist to turn. This is something that the poet Rumi knew very well about. Mm-hmm. And so A squared RE talks about that art form of pivoting according to angular rotation. The universe turns, and we got to keep up with it.
It's always expanding, right?
It's a very expanding, but it's a rotating maneuver. And in the world that we live in, which is very linear, that is not a very familiar concept.
Right.
Matter of fact, most people aren't even aware of it. And then the last one, which is the very important one of love, this time I say that love is really the environment. If you break it down to its actual letters, it describes an environment that when you exist and live within that environment of love, of the higher frequencies, of the expansiveness, of abundance and prosperity, that is part of that environment in contrast to survival. And by choice, you can live in that environment, and everything that you do there responds back to you in a positive nature. Absolutely. So you are love, to me, has a real meaning to it and a real application to it.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to cover more of that, particularly the pivoting aspect. But one of the things that you talk about is that one of the purposes of your book is to help people move from the known place of comfort and familiarity in our present lives to a place of unfamiliarity and discomfort in order to make the very unknown realize. Now, this is right up my alley here.
Yes.
And so, this is a part of the purpose of your book, for people to actually get out of the comfort zone where there's stagnation.
Right.
And to move into what's unfamiliar, where all the juice is.
Well, and not only that, the only constant in life is change.
Right.
So as hard as you try to keep things status quo, you're changing. So you might as well get with the program and learn the most smoothest and optimum way and most efficient way to move from your comfort zone into the unknown, so you can grow. You can enlarge your life. You can move from a small life to a bigger life. This is called growth. It's called ascension. It's called evolution.
Right.
So that requires you being able to master moving into the unknown, which is also pivoting, but it also helps you master fear, overcome fear, which is usually what people have the hardest time moving past. And, David Hawkins in his book, Power versus Force, identified that courage was the baseline, that people were able to move beyond fear into love. So in business, we call that risk-taking.
Right.
We call that risk tolerance. If you can tolerate living and moving into the unknown or just leaning into it, your life will naturally expand because that's a forward movement.
Yes. That's where the bliss is. The bliss is the activation of our potential. And if you're not leaning into the unknown, you don't activate your potential and you're in hell. You're in stagnation.
Exactly. Or, in business, it's called adrenaline.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The entrepreneur loves the adrenaline of being able to go into the unknown because that's where everything lies.
Right. I appreciate you mentioning David Hawkins. He was a friend of mine, and he would speak at Agape, and we did seminars together, and a great mystic. We would speak sometimes in Arizona, and it didn't matter who went first because we can kind of just pick up on where we were and dance with each other in that nonlinear zone,
Oh, absolutely. I quote his map of consciousness a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's very visual for people to finally understand, how do you move from fear to love, and courage is just a baseline.
Absolutely. You also talk about being is dynamic action in motion, centered in the moment of here and now. And so when you're talking about pivoting gracefully and playing the game well, because your introduction has a message on the game of life, where the only constant that you just said is change, and that being is dynamic. I like that. That's powerful.
Well, if you think about it, and what my book really speaks to is the art form of living in the moment, each and every moment. Okay, and being in the now in that moment. So it really talks about movement, that life is about movement and learning how to move gracefully with the universe and your environment is how you essentially grow. It's just movement as opposed to being still in the way that most people talk about it. I talk about being still in a negative format is paralysis, but being still in conscious awareness, able to move, that's a different story.
Yeah, I call that moving stillness.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it, where you're consciously aware, you're still within yourself, but you are so alert to the changing of the scenery around you. And you're identifying the most important critical details of movement in each situation. And that's how you segue. That's how you surge. That's how you do a quantum leap. This book is about the art form of moving.
Absolutely. If you're just tuning in to Wake Up, The Sound of Transformation, I'm with Abigail Diaz Juan. The book I have in my hand right now is called How Me Found I, Mastering the Art of Pivoting Gracefully Through Life. So that's the powerful voice you're hearing with me. And you go on to break down the game of life in a very sweet, wonderful way. Life plus order plus vibration plus energy spells out love. I think that's a powerful way of remembering what you're saying. LOVE, life, order, vibration, and energy. Just expound upon that for a second or two.
Well, it's really an algorithm because when you add all of that together, it's the environment. And so it's also how you move. So you're moving to levels or of frequency. So the higher the frequency, the more expansive your life. The lower the frequency, the more contracted your life. So imagine a vortex or an ice cream cone. So as you move up, you move outward. And that's the expansiveness of levels. Order. We live in a dimension where time matters. Time and space matters. So there's an order to it. There's a sequence to it. You evolve on a clockwise direction. You remember things in a counterclockwise direction with memory. If you look at somebody during NLP, you'll notice their eyes will dart to the right when they're imagining the future, will dart to the left when they're remembering something. So if you understand that there is an order to how things happen, then you don't worry about the randomness of things. There is a reason why things happen. There is purpose and order, and there is no accident in the universe. V for vibration, that's how we move. We undulate. We are energy, so we undulate as a form of energy. How you undulate simply tells you that when you're undulating upward, you're having a really expansive moment. When you undulate downward, you're having a contractic, a magnetic moment. It's not a good or bad unless you place judgment on that. If you know that that is normal and it's natural, you don't get in your own way by judging what is happening. You just simply switch gears to accommodate for the change. And then E pretty much encompasses everything. Everything's energy. Energy's everything. That means if you view life from that perspective, you're able to see more than just a narrow spectrum of your five senses. All of a sudden, you have a 360 view of what is happening around you, both in the seen and unseen world. That gives you immense power for you to see optimum choices and make decisions from that. The better the choices, the better the decisions, the better the decisions, the better the choices. And again, that's how you evolve, ascend, and grow. So, none of this is random. Basically, life is purposeful, and there's meaning and direction to your life. It's just that you may not be aware of it. But once you are, you're able to grow your life more expeditiously. You can accelerate into a life that is filled with abundance and prosperity, and there is a scientific way of it happening that way. This is not, what we call woo-woo stuff. This is actually an algorithm. It's a formula. And if you're able to follow that formula and customize it to yourself, you're able to get what you want.
I like that.
But you have to follow the formula.
I like that. You customize the formula to yourself. So you basically are developing your own personal law, how the universe responds to you based on you following the formula with discipline and sincerity.
Exactly. In a really simple way, the game of life is you have to understand that any game has its set of rules on how to move around the game board. After you figure that out and you're interacting with all the other players around the board, let's say the universe and you are the players on the board, then what happens is you're able to move around the board, i.e. co-create, because you know the principles. You know the rules of the game. Then you can get fancy, and then you can figure out how to move around the game a lot faster, a lot easier, et cetera, et cetera. You can figure out what it is you want out of the game. But like every game out there, there are rules to the game, and there are principles to life. So once you know that, the amazing amount of creation you can do is infinite.
Absolutely. I love it. Now, one of the things you're reminding me of in your dialogue with us is something that you write about on page 11, the truth versus perception, and how they interact with each other to create our experience of life. Expound upon that for our listeners today.
Well, it's really funny today, and let me just give a little context. We live in a very dual-oriented environment, which is very polarized. It's a very linear, polarized, dualized environment. And when you actually understand that, then you start to realize that truth really means pick a side.
Yes.
That becomes then the absolute truth, when in reality, the way the universe works is perception, because everything's always changing and always evolving, and you're never going to be standing in another person's shoes exactly looking out of their eyes exactly at the same point of view in the horizon. So perception is you looking through your eyes at an ever-evolving environment and understanding the environment, comprehending it within the context of that ever-moving, ever-evolving status. So what is the difference between one and the other? Truth is static, truth is absolute, and truth is temporary, but it's treated as permanent. Perception is ongoing, it's evolving, it's ever-changing, therefore it's dynamic, but it's beneficial because it provides you context as you step into the unknown.
And that's our perception. So everybody's perception of life determines their particular experience.
Oh, absolutely. Now, if you can look at that from an individualistic perspective and move that to a collective perspective, then when everybody shares the common perception of life, then the collective environment, the social environment, your holographic environment changes towards that perspective.
Mm-hmm. And that can be life-affirming or life-destroying. I mean, we could have an emotional contagion where everyone's in agreement about we're living in a world of scarcity, or we can have an awareness that we're surrounded by abundance. And so sometimes society is mirroring the lower part of us, and sometimes individuals break through that and are living in a much wider perception of life.
That is exactly it. And I truly believe it's my purpose in writing this book to be able to say, look, there is the other way. Here's the bridge to walk across that gap. We live in a very socially enforced, fear-driven world. Everything we do, every decision we do is designed to contract us.
Yes.
Whether that's purposeful or not, that is just simply the social environment we are in. And yet, we as natural human beings are extraordinarily powerful and meant to live in an abundant, higher frequency, expansive, prosperous environment. So shifting perspective from fear-driven to love-driven begins that walk across the bridge into the higher frequencies. and you start to experience life that way. I mean, have had it where you've actually been in a room and one person next to you looks really like they're miserable, and then the other person looks like they're having the biggest blast of their life. And you wonder, why are they having such different experiences when they're sitting in the same room?
Absolutely.
It's perception.
Yeah.
And it's also a matter of choice and owning that choice.
Absolutely. And so that mastering our choice is actually what we call spiritual practice, or making higher choices, or having a level of intentionality where we're not victimized by the external circumstance, but we're actually expanding our awareness, expanding our perception to participate in a larger field. And everyone and anyone can do this with a level of intentionality and practice.
Now, let's take it another step further, Michael. The challenge with a lot of the people pursuing a spiritual discipline is they have a hard time blending that with the practical, everyday life.
Yeah.
And so there's a separation in a way between the two. I have a spiritual discipline, but I still have to get up and go to work in the morning, and et cetera, the mundaneness of ordinary life. The trick really is, from my perspective, is the ability to translate that spiritual discipline into everyday moments of life.
Yes.
So that there is no separation. I was just at a conference in February where I stood up in front of the audience and I said, look, money and success is a goal, but I truly believe what everybody is seeking is personal freedom and realized soulful self-expression.
Yes. I'm in absolute agreement with that.
Don't mistake the two.
Right. One, you're learning to stabilize a structure in your life. And when that structure is stabilized, you have more freedom to actually express your real nature, creativity, love, compassion, kindness, beauty. Because the structure is stabilized. But as you're saying, that's a goal to stabilize that structure. But that's not like your entire purpose for living.
Exactly. You are not your job.
Right.
You are not your role. You are a human being first and foremost. And I'm really taking that concept to practice. In my field as a venture capitalist, I'm actually working on a project that has been the cultivation of about 10 years. It actually came out of a vision at the onset of my spontaneous Kundalini experience. And I've been steadily working towards it all these years, and hopefully we can start to bring it out next year. But it's really about if you can take those natural principles, which the ego has actually applied to in business, we don't apply it to ourselves, but we apply it to innovation in business. And so what I'm hoping to do is to be able to bring this project out next year that is for women entrepreneurs in a global manner.
I can't participate?
Oh, absolutely you can participate. Are you kidding me? I just happen to think we need to balance the world a little bit.
Absolutely.
So this is kind of like, how do you fix the seesaw when one side is heavier than the other? You put your weight on the lighter side. But I really want to bring these practices into practical application. And to me, within the book, I actually compare a lot of these principles to business applications. And I say, look, if you took this and you understood this as critical thinking and strategy and applied your business practices towards this, you will naturally, underscore the word naturally, expand and grow.
Right.
Both personally and professionally. And that's the personal freedom part, and that's the soulful realized self-expression.
Absolutely.
Imbued in your world out here. So that's a very close project to my heart.
Very good. We're going to segue right into our rhythm and bliss moment. And when we come back, she's going to tell us why when life takes a turn for the worse, it's not necessarily the end of the world. We're going to talk about emotions to a degree, intuition. So we'll be right back with Abby Diaz Juan. How me found I. We're back with Abby Diaz Juan. How me found I. Mastering the art of pivoting gracefully through life. Now, one of the things you talk about is when life takes a turn for the worst, Abby, it's not necessarily the end of the world as we know it.
No, the pot of gold is always at the end of the rainbow, which only appears after a storm has passed.
Oh, I love it. I love that analogy. I love it.
We actually now get into the art form of pivoting. So we were talking earlier in our dialogue about energy by nature undulates. So if you really look at how we do undulate, not only do we vertically undulate, so we go up and down, right? We expand and contract, but we also ebb and flow. We wax and wane. So we go side.
That was right in the song that we just heard.
Exactly. So when you look at that going up and down and side to side type of situation, there is by definition 3 parts to a step or a moment, and that is a pivot. There is the first part, which is the contractive part. So that's called a hesitation, believe it or not, in science. That's when you're experiencing the fall, the contractive nature of a bad storm. You know, things are looking bad around you, things are dissolving, and you just don't know what to do with it. That's going down in frequency. Then the second part of it is the switchover. You know, most disciplines and most people only know how to do one or the other. But there's always a part in the middle, which is this actual switchover part. And so, you know, when a storm goes and it ends, before the rainbow happens, the rain stops. There's that physical moment of the rain stopping. Mm-hmm. And then the rainbow appears. So the third stage of this thing is what we call the surge. This is when you move upward now. The second part is when you change direction. The third part and final part of a movement is surging upward. So that's a pivot anatomy. But because you're waxing and waning and you're ebbing and flowing, essentially you have to include the concept of rotation into it. What does that mean? You may have started in one place, but you will end up in a different place. Because you're turning, you're being moved in a different way. So rotation's kind of like you're at a beach, you walk out in the water, you think you're moving in a straight line. You turn around to go back to the beach and your towel's nowhere to be found because you've been rotated by the universe or Earth's revolution. Same thing applies here. The pot of gold will always be to the right if you're turning always clockwise, and you know you're going to encounter something that's going to create a hesitation. If you know that, you're aware of that, and you're prepared for that, then what happens is you get through it more effectively. Unfortunately, what happens is people don't understand the concept of fear. By placing a judgment of good or bad on it, they enter into the hesitation part of the fall, and they think it's permanent. So they're just totally in free fall, in full contraction. And they speed up the process the more fearful they become. They don't realize that fear and hesitation is kind of like driving on the road and you arrive at an intersection and there's a red light. You're supposed to stop, look around, and then decide where you're going to go next. It is simply when fear appears or that contraction in your stomach where your gut is like squeezing up in knots, that's an indicator to you that the forward movement you're on, walking forward, you need to stop, pause, and look around, because where you're going to turn is right there. That's what right. The now moment is so important.
Right. So you're giving people actually a process how to navigate, as you're calling it, pivot through uncomfortable circumstances and situations. You're helping them understand that what we call fear is an energy, not to label it, but kind of just to lean into it and take it with you so it can be transmuted into a higher frequency.
Precisely. You know, we are trained to stay away and avoid discomfort. But when energy is moving, it's discomforting because it's moving. So the stillness in the movement that you and I were speaking about earlier is that ability to stay still and not go into drama as the energy is moving through you.
Right. That means not going into worst-case scenarios with your mind.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You know, the drama part about putting judgment on it, and then all of a sudden you're kicking the dog, you're screaming at somebody, you're blowing everything up, and now you got to repair it when you come out of that crisis mode. If you want to get a little bit more, if your listeners would like to understand this a little bit more, there is an article I wrote specifically about this in pivoting that is on my website. And if you go to mydiamondquest.net, right on the homepage, you can actually opt in and get that article. And it's been very helpful for a lot of people. It's kind of like a great cheat sheet for when you're trying to figure out how to get out of the storm.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Let's talk about our emotions for a moment and how they are what you call the calibrator of our well-being and quality of our actions. You have some wonderful teaching around that.
Thank you, Michael. I'm so impressed. You know, some people, when they talk to me, don't look at the book. I'm so gratified that you actually have looked through this book and you're pulling out some great stuff.
Yeah, you know, it's so coherent with what I teach, and it's obvious that you have definitely had an opening. You have the articulation of profound truths that you're able to bring to people, whether they're laymen or whether they're veterans. You're bringing it in a very powerful way, so I really appreciate how you're doing this.
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored by those words. So when you're actually looking at emotions, what I say is that there's three intelligences that we have. There is the one that most people know, which is of the mind, the intellect, the IQ. And we're just beginning now to accept and understand that the heart is the intuitive intelligence.
Yes.
Well, what we've always thought was the counterpart to the mental, to the IQ was what people are now calling emotional intelligence, the EQ. And what I'm saying is that because we as human beings are evolving to becoming points of light, we have to learn how to navigate more than just the three directions. We actually have to know how to tilt. We actually have to know how to move in empty air rather than walking on terrain. So when you look at it from that concept, think of an airplane. It has different instruments on its dashboard to tell it whether or not it's going straight, whether it's turning sideways, or whether it's tilting, going up and down. The emotional quotient of intelligence, which is the gut area, which is where you're feeling the movement of energy moving through you, it's your barometer. It tells you the situation you're in. So as a human being, the way we move is we move through situations. We move through events that are created by situations that then become our state of circumstances. So if you think about it from that, it's like stepping stones. The emotional quotient, your gut, tells you how you're moving through the situation from event to event. And based upon what you are feeling from there, you're able to determine what you need to do and what you want to do in terms of a pivot. So when your stomach is contracting, you know you're falling, or you know that energy is rushing and it's building up charge. One of my most popular workshops I'm being asked about to give is convert fear into natural power. How do you do that? Well, it's called creating torque or creating charge. And like a car uses torque to increase its speed and its horsepower, we do the same exact thing. We crouch like an animal does by building torque. So our gut, our emotions, registers that torque. The intensity of it, the amount of it, the speed of it, all of that is going on with our emotional intelligence. Our heart is what lets us go into the unknown. It guides us through the unseen world like sonar is to a submarine. And then our mental mind is what does the comprehension, the awareness, translates it, understands it. So when those three are working in concert, you're able to navigate through the unknown much more easily. The way people do it today is because they're unaware of how these three intelligences work together in an integrated, harmonious fashion, is they place a lot of dependence upon their mind and a lot of dependence upon their emotional intelligence.
Right.
And they let the emotional intelligence drive them into drama because they're unaware of what its real purpose is, which is building charge, building torque, building power for the surge, for the quantum surge.
It's not to give us feedback to what reality is. It's just to help us move forward.
That's right. Look at an animal in the jungle. Look at a tiger. Look at a lion. Look at the felines. Every time they're ready to pounce, surge, they all crouch downward, inward. They become small. They gather in the grass, and then when they're ready, they move. And when they move, when they're ready, it's a very high jump.
Right.
If you move before you're ready, which is you dissipate the charging of that power or that energy by acting out or trying to get rid of it, you dissolve it. What happens is you don't surge very well. Your life doesn't change very well or in the positive. You move in very tiny steps, very incremental. So think of the difference between walking on a sidewalk versus driving a car versus flying an airplane in terms of speed, intensity, strength, power, all of that type of stuff.
So the average person is basically taken their emotions and their thoughts, and they've overridden their natural value system.
Not only have they overridden it, because the ego needs a guaranteed outcome, they're never in the moment where maximum optimum change can happen. That's the now moment. That's the center point of change of direction. They're always way ahead of it. So they will miss the opportunity to turn in a better direction. In a way, when you're constantly thinking about survival, you miss the opportunity for abundance because you're just too far out in the wrong direction.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So even when people attain certain goals and they still haven't come out of that survival mode, they don't get to experience the happiness of the attainment of the goal because they're still in survival, dealing with worst-case scenarios and projecting that into the future. So they just burn up adrenaline all the time and burn out their immune system and their adrenals because they haven't come out of that whole survival modality.
Oh, exactly. I mean, that's what happened to me. I was managing a multi-billion-dollar fund and had that mindset. So, of course, you know, the trick about it is that survival means you never expand. You're always in a contractive mode, and it's always going to be more and more effort the more you enforce your direction, because it's contrary to what the universe wants for you.
Absolutely.
You are going against the grain. You're zigging when everybody else is zagging. We are the only species on this planet that zigs when everybody zags.
Right. We work against our own activation of potential, and we're working towards the extinction of our own race. That's
literally it. And we're doing it so quickly.
Yeah.
So
now we have technology to help us kill ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. That is contraction. Contraction means your system is preparing to die.
Yeah. Let's just wipe out the rainforest. Let's kill the forests. Let's kill the rivers. Let's kill the ocean. Let's kill the environment. Let's kill each other.
Exactly. And I think that I could not have written this book before now, because I think now is where we need to turn. We're at switchover point. If we don't switch over to a surge, in an upward direction, we will become extinct.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important enough for me to
just pay attention.
On the beach. Yeah, pay attention, do our work, and that's important to me, I guess.
It is.
And after this Kundalini awakening, now it's my life.
If you're just tuning into the last part of our meeting of the heart and soul, I'm with Abigail Diaz Juan, How Me Found I, Mastering the Art of Pivoting Gracefully Through Life. This has been beautiful. Something else is very close to me, and that is the empowering questions. I teach about this a lot, that when problems arise in our life, we ask questions like, what did I do wrong?
And we automatically place judgment.
And so these keep us in victimhood. Just expound upon that a little bit, because I think people default to those kind of questions. And I think that if we dialogue a little bit about it, they can have a little more consciousness about what kind of questions to ask when things seem to be going wrong.
Well, I think this is a perfect segue. If you take the one single thing, and that is, as long as you stay in the upper frequencies above the courage line, again, I'm referring to David Hawkins, love is at 500 megahertz, fear is at 100, courage is at 200. Right. So the idea that David Hawkins was saying is that below the courage line, in the fear-driven world where guilt and shame and regret and all of that stuff and anger all reside, it takes tremendous effort just to maintain.
Yes.
You're treading water and you're kicking underneath the water. When you pass the courage line into the upper frequencies where love is, peace of mind being at the very top, joy, happiness, all of those types of things, your world naturally expands because you're now a natural power. So it's like being in an airplane versus swimming by yourself below hand. If you take that in context, then you understand that polarity and duality is the lower frequencies. And the higher frequencies is about oneness. And the reason I say oneness is because not only are you able to reach collective power, you're able to go towards the middle where the opening is. This is what people refer to as the opening of the Vesica Pisces. When two circles intersect, they create an opening. If you live in that opening, you're constantly growing and evolving and moving. And to do that, you have to stay in the upper frequencies. So emotions and judgment of yourself brings you down. Acceptance and ownership of your actions and who you are brings you to the now moment where you can make a conscious choice, and it eventually becomes second nature, to live in the upper frequencies. Right. That's where life exists. Right. That's where love is. That is the arena of love.
What we want people to know is this is not airy-fairy stuff.
No, this is scientific stuff.
You can actually practice living in these higher frequencies until your life experience begins to mirror those frequencies.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, in the beginning, like every other discipline, you got to be consciously aware to be in the now moment, because that's the only place the opening exists. If you jump too far ahead in the future or you fall too far in the back, you miss the opening. It's all about the opening. So when you understand that and you get that, then it's about consciously being aware of it. You have to own it, because owning it, owning your actions, exercises your free will, which as a human being is what differentiates us from every other species. You are here to experience and mature your free will capabilities.
Right.
That it goes back to choices and decisions.
Right.
Which means you have to own your decisions and be discerning about your choices.
Right.
Kind of, everything connects.
Yeah, we're the only species that actually see into non-dimensional reality and actually embrace the spiritual essence of life and choose to live at that level regardless of circumstance. Now, what happens when individuals generally identify with their historical past?
doesn't get very far if it's in a negative position, because it's like driving forward looking in the rearview mirror.
Right.
There is a reason why the rearview mirror is the smallest mirror in the entire car. And the windshield
I like that
very,
too.
very big. Yeah, don't move forward looking backwards because you'll miss a lot. But the most important thing about this ownership part is that once you own it, you move.
Right.
Everything starts to move for you. The environment, socially controlled environment that keeps the conditioned personality placid, malleable, and under control says you are a victim and you're going to get rescued. So therefore, you don't need to own anything because everybody is at fault.
Yes.
You're not at fault. Well, that keeps you locked in a place of stagnant.
Yes.
You can't move anywhere from that. But the minute you take ownership of who you are, what you are, where you are, what happens is the whole world changes around you, and you suddenly realize the inherent power you have. The other way, you've given your power away, and you continually do that. And power is energy.
We're coming to a close, but we don't want to leave, because we're talking about pivoting, nature's way of steering us towards growth. And you have a wonderful human algorithm, A²RE, accept.
Yes.
I think this is very important to help people pivot. Break that down for us.
A²RE, and the reason I use the number squared is because the first A is when you accept where you are at this very moment, this very second, good or bad about it, it's exactly where you are. The minute you accept that and not dream or deny it, the minute you accept it, you're allowing the pivoting process to continue. You're allowing the universe to rotate you to a better place, a better position, a better direction. So the two work off of each other. One gives power and permission to the other to continue. The third letter, R, stands for release. It's kind of like you're in a car and you're hoping to move forward, but you forgot to put down the parking brake. You're going to have drag. So you have to release anything that is dragging you back, whether it is regret, whether it's your history, whatever it is, release all resistance.
Yes.
As you're releasing all resistance, then what happens is you segue to the fourth letter, which is E for embrace. Embrace what is coming towards you, because as it's coming towards you, it's like you'll see only a little bit of it, and then it starts to get larger and larger. But at the very beginning, you're not going to understand because only a little bit of it will show up. It's like in San Francisco when you're in the revolving restaurant on top of the Hyatt. Alcatraz is in the bay, but you turn around and first you'll see the hills, then you'll see the water, then you'll see the edge of the island, and then Alcatraz comes into full view. It's the same thing. You have to embrace what is coming towards you as you're being rotated clockwise, even though you may not understand or agree with it. Remember, the pot of gold comes after the storm, not before it. So that is the art form of pivoting through a transition. And remember, the only constant we have in life is change. So if you master pivoting very, very well, you're going to be amazed at how much in the flow you're in.
I love it. Accept, allow, release, embrace. This is what we're inviting people to be about.
Exactly. And that article I was mentioning on my website actually breaks that down in detail for them to look at.
Okay, we're going to have you mention that again. But as we close out, something else is very dear to me that I teach. I think we can't talk about it, and that is the breath being a singular ritual given to us by nature to not only control our breathing, but able to control the quality of our life. Explain why that is so true.
Well, breath is what we need to live, to exist. So if you look at the breath as your guiding mantra, it's broken down into three parts again. You exhale the old, then you pause in stillness for the switch over and to build up charge within you. And then you inhale to bring in the new. So whether you are exhaling or inhaling, the fact of the matter is we are electromagnetic beings.
Yes.
So that means we're either extending out, exhale, or we're inhaling, which is we're magnetic and we're bringing in. One does not operate without the other. And at the very middle, there's always going to be a switchover. That's the stillness. That's bringing you back to the very now moment so you have full awareness. When you understand that the breath is our own red ribbon around the finger and it's the way we exist and stay alive, it has so much depth and meaning to it because everything exists around the breath. It's both the symbolic way of who we are as a human being, but it's also the way we are able to stay alive and exist. Everything rotates around that. It's the magic of three.
Right. So individuals can learn to consciously breathe so that they're consciously participating in their own unfolding and not getting caught up in the external circumstances as the determination of their destiny. They're able to set their destiny free.
Exactly. I mean, if you held your breath, you would explode, right? That's a contraction. If you breathe too hard, you would hyperventilate. Right. But if you breathe normally, naturally, easily, then life comes to you that way as well.
Right.
So it's all in the breath. It's one of the things I've actually learned from you, Michael.
Well, I appreciate that. Listen, tell us your website and how people can be in touch with you.
My website is called mydiamondquest.net. And on the website, you get to learn a little bit more about me. You can get an autographed copy of the book. You can also get the article. It's called The Art of the Soft Pivot on the homepage. And just take a look around. I'm being asked for some workshops out there. I just finished the Conscious Life Expo, the Music Expo, and I'm now going and I'm speaking to the Toastmasters next month as well. But we are also moving into building a series of workshops around this. So check me out. I think we're going to start putting stuff up on YouTube.
Outstanding. Hey, everyone. This is Abigail Diaz Juan. Abby. How Me Found I, Mastering the Art of Pivoting Gracefully Through Life. The interview was fantastic. Please get her book because there's so much left on the table here that we did not cover. I'm leaving you wanting more. So go to her website and see the free stuff that she has up there, the articles and all of that good stuff. This has been great. mydiamondquest.net. If you want to know what's going on at Agape International Spiritual Center, go to agapelive.com, agapelive.com. Come to service on Sunday. Bill Duke will be with us on Sundays having a wonderful book signing. Lyra from South Africa will be a part of our musical inspiration. Of course, I'll be speaking. We have the Way of Meditation service beginning at 7 a.m. The next meditation starts at 8:30 with the service starting at 9. The next meditation service starts at 11, service starting at 11:30. Come on out and be in this powerful, magnificent spiritual community, one of the most diverse, inclusive communities in the world. High inspiration, high community, high love. Remember, spiritual community grants you immunity from the lower frequencies of life. So for Abby and myself, we say pay attention to the breath, establish intention, and allow the God times to roll. Have a powerful, magnificent day. Peace and blessings.